Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight we're huddling close to explore something that might make you appreciate your thermostat a little more. Picture this. You're standing in a one-room hovel, the December wind screaming through gaps in the wattle and daub walls, your breath forming clouds in the indoor air, and you've got about 16 hours of darkness ahead, with nothing but a dying fire and some very questionable bedding between you and hypothermia. Here's a fun reality check. Without your smartphone, central heating, or even basic insulation, you probably wouldn't survive your first medieval winter. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your cozy, heated corner of the world. All right, let's begin the story. The cold hits you like a physical presence, pressing against your skin through layers of rough-spun cloth. You're not dealing with the romantic notion of winter you might see in medieval tapestries. This is survival-level cold that turns your fingers blue and makes your teeth chatter so hard you worry they might crack. Your name could be William or Emma, John or Matilda. But what matters more than your name is your status. You're a peasant, which means you're about to face winter with the heating technology of, well, essentially, a campfire and prayer. You live in what historians call a cruck house. Imagine two massive curved tree trunks leaning against each other to form an A-frame, with walls filled in using woven branches plastered with a delightful mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. Yes, you literally live in a house partially made of poop, but don't knock it. That dung is actually one of your better insulators. The walls are maybe a foot thick if you're lucky, and every gap between the timbers is a potential wind tunnel. Some historians argue whether peasants actually sealed these gaps with moss and mud annually, or just suffered through the drafts. But from where you're standing tonight, feeling that icy breeze knife through your home, you're definitely team seal everything. Your floor is packed earth, occasionally covered with rushes or straw that you change. Well, when they start moving on their own. Basically, there's no chimney. That's for rich people. Just a hole in the roof above your central hearth. This means your home is constantly filled with smoke, which burns your eyes and coats everything in soot. But hey, at least the smoke helps preserve the meat hanging from your rafters and keeps some of the insects at bay. The mainstream historical fact here is that most peasant homes before the 14th century didn't have chimneys. They relied on smoke holes or louvers. The quirky tidbit: some peasants believed the smoke had protective properties against evil spirits, which is convenient when you can't afford to fix the ventilation anyway. You glance at your fire, the heart of your survival strategy. It's not the roaring blaze you might imagine from movies. No, this is a carefully managed pile of embers, glowing red and orange in the darkness. You've banked it for the night, covering it with ashes to slow the burn. Wood is precious, gathered through back-breaking labor during summer and autumn, and you need this fire to last until dawn. If it dies completely, you'll have to beg embers from a neighbor, assuming they're feeling generous and you can make it to their door without freezing. Your bed, and I use that term loosely, is a straw-filled sack on a raised platform if you're doing relatively well, or just a pile of straw on the floor if you're not. The platform matters because cold air sinks, and even 6 inches off the ground can mean the difference between miserable and unbearable. You share this bed with your spouse, your children, and possibly your parents if they're still alive. Privacy is a concept that won't be invented for centuries. Body heat is currency, and everyone pools their resources. The darkness is absolute. You might have a rushlight, a reed soaked in animal fat, but it gives off more smoke than light and burns through your precious fat reserves. Most nights, once the sun sets around 4 in the afternoon, you're plunged into a darkness so complete that you navigate by memory and touch. Your hands know every rough beam, every irregular stone around the hearth, every dip in the earthen floor. Your eyes adjust to the dim glow from the hearth, and you take stock of your architectural masterpiece. If you can call a structure that's one strong wind away from collapse a masterpiece. The thing is, your hovel isn't just randomly thrown together. Every beam, every angle, every seemingly haphazard choice has been refined over generations of peasants who learned the hard way that heat rises and cold kills. The cruck frame that holds up your roof isn't just about structural support. Those massive curved timbers create a peaked ceiling that traps warm air in a pocket above your living space. You've noticed how the warmest spot in your home is the sleeping loft, that platform built into the rafters where the children sleep. Heat rises, and medieval peasants figured this out long before anyone could explain the physics. During the coldest nights, the temperature difference between floor level and loft level can be a full 10 degrees. Doesn't sound like much until you realize those degrees might be the difference between frostbite and keeping all your toes. Your walls tell a story of desperate innovation. The wattle and daub technique, weaving flexible branches between upright posts and slathering the whole thing with that mud straw dung mixture, creates thousands of tiny air pockets. Air, when trapped and still, is actually a decent insulator. Of course, you don't think about it in those terms. You just know that a properly daubed wall feels less cold to the touch than a stone one. And that's good enough for you. Some historians still debate whether peasants understood insulation principles or just stumbled onto effective techniques through trial and error. But when you're patching a crack with fresh cow dung mixed with horsehair, academic debates feel pretty distant. The single-room design isn't poverty, it's strategy. Multiple rooms mean multiple spaces to heat, and you can barely keep one room bearable. Everything happens in this space: cooking, eating, sleeping, working. And yes, those awkward moments when nature calls and it's too cold to visit the outdoor privy. That's what the chamber pot in the corner is for, adding its own special fragrance to the already complex smell profile of smoke, animals, and unwashed humans. Your roof is thatch, thick bundles of rye straw laid in overlapping layers. When it's properly maintained, which, let's be honest, yours probably isn't. Thatch can be surprisingly effective. It's like wearing a heavy coat for your house. The thick layers trap air, shed rain, and when snow piles on top, it actually adds extra insulation. The quirky historical tidbit: some medieval peasants would deliberately avoid clearing snow off their roofs for this reason, though they had to balance insulation benefits against the risk of collapse. You eye your own roof nervously. It's been sagging since last winter, and you really should have rethatched this summer, but the law demanded extra labor days during harvest. Windows are the enemy of warmth, so you have exactly one, and it's tiny, maybe the size of your head. There's no glass. That's for churches and castles. Instead, you have a wooden shutter that you can close against the worst weather, plunging your home into even deeper darkness. Or you might have stretched a piece of oiled parchment across the opening. On very special occasions, you might even have a pig's bladder stretched over the window, translucent enough to let in a bit of light while keeping out the worst of the wind. Romantic, right? The hearth sits in the center of your room, a rough circle of stones that contains your life-giving fire. The stones matter more than you might think. They absorb heat during the day and radiate it back during the night, acting as a primitive thermal battery. You've learned to choose your hearthstones carefully, dense stones that hold heat well, not ones that might crack and explode when heated. That's a lesson usually learned the hard way, with singed eyebrows and panic around the edges of your room. You've done what you can to add extra insulation. Old scraps of cloth are stuffed into cracks. Dried moss fills gaps between timbers. In one corner, you've piled up turfs, blocks of peat that serve double duty as future fuel and current wall insulation. The mainstream historical consensus is that medieval peasants were remarkably resourceful about insulation, using whatever materials were locally available. In coastal areas, they might use seaweed. In forested regions, pine needles and bark. You use what you have, which is mostly agricultural waste and hope. Your door deserves special mention. It's the largest opening in your wall, and therefore your biggest vulnerability. Made of rough planks held together with wooden pegs, iron nails are for people who can afford them. It never quite fits properly in its frame. You've hung a heavy cloth just inside the door, your grandmother's old cloak, too worn to wear but too valuable to throw away. This creates a primitive airlock, a dead space that provides one more barrier against the cold. On the worst nights, you'll pile everything you can against the door. Sacks of grain, bundles of firewood, even furniture. The floor beneath your feet has its own thermal properties. Packed earth might seem like the worst possible flooring, but it's actually not bad. Earth maintains a relatively stable temperature, cooler in summer and warmer in winter than the air above it. You've covered it with a layer of rushes mixed with herbs, meadowsweet if you could find it, which releases a pleasant smell when crushed underfoot. These rushes provide a bit of insulation from the ground and absorb, well, various liquids that end up on your floor. You try not to think too hard about what you're walking on. The wind picks up outside, and you hear that familiar whistle through the gaps in your walls. Time to implement the most effective heating system available to medieval peasants, the family dog pile. You start gathering everyone for bed, which is less going to bed and more strategic human Tetris for survival. Your wife is already arranging the children, smallest in the middle, biggest on the outside, like some sort of thermal efficiency chart made of offspring. The sleeping arrangement would horrify modern sensibilities. You, your wife, your 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 11, your elderly mother, and your brother's family of 4 all share the same sleeping space. That's 9 humans generating roughly 900 watts of heat. You don't know the math, but you know that 9 bodies are warmer than 2. Privacy? That's a luxury you literally cannot afford. When historians debate whether medieval peasants had a concept of privacy, you want to laugh. Try maintaining privacy when your mother-in-law's knee is in your back and your nephew's foot is in your face. But wait, the human heat generators are only part of your biological furnace. You hear a soft lowing from the other end of your home. Yes, your cow shares your living space. She's separated from the human area by a woven partition that reaches maybe chest height, which does absolutely nothing to contain the smell, but at least stops her from stepping on the children. Your 2 goats are there too, and the pig, though he's in a corner pen because pigs, it turns out, are bed hogs in more ways than one. The chickens roost in the rafters above, occasionally providing unwanted blessings on whoever's unlucky enough to sleep directly below. The mainstream historical record confirms that keeping livestock indoors was standard practice across medieval Europe. But here's the quirky bit. Some regions developed specific architectural features called biodwellings, where the animal and human areas were deliberately designed to share heat through a common wall. You don't have anything that fancy. Your animals are just straight-up roommates. The cow alone generates about 1,000 watts of heat, roughly equivalent to a small space heater. Add in the goats, the pig, and even the chickens, and you've got yourself a living, breathing, extremely smelly heating system. You spread out the sleeping materials, straw-filled sacks that pass for mattresses, a few precious woolen blankets that represent years of spinning and weaving, and various cloaks and outer garments that do double duty as bedding. The arrangement is crucial. The oldest and youngest get the warmest spots, sandwiched between others. You and the other adults form the outer layer, a human shield against the cold. It's not heroism, it's practical. Adults can generate and retain heat better than children or elderly. The evening ritual begins. Everyone visits the chamber pot one last time because nobody wants to be the person who has to get up in the middle of the night. You bank the fire carefully, covering the embers with ash to slow their burn. Too much air and your precious fuel burns too fast. Too little and the fire dies completely. It's an art form passed down through generations. And you still remember your father teaching you the exact right amount of ash to use, how to read the color of the embers, how to position the unburned wood just so. Now comes the undressing debate. Do you sleep in your clothes for extra warmth or remove them to avoid dampness from sweat? Historians still argue about medieval sleeping habits, but the practical answer varies with the temperature. Tonight's cold enough that you're keeping everything on except your boots. Those go under the blanket with you. Leather frozen solid is impossible to put on in the morning, and foot wrappings alone won't protect you from the floor. As everyone settles in, the soundscape of your night begins. 9 people breathing, snoring, shifting. The cow's digestive system providing a constant background rumble. Goats bleating occasionally in their sleep. The pig snorting and shuffling in his corner. The chickens rustling overhead. The house itself creaks and groans as timber contracts in the cold. It's like trying to sleep in a barn because, well, that's essentially what you're doing. Body heat accumulation is a slow process. At first, the bed pile feels miserably cold. The straw pokes through the thin fabric. Every draft finds its way under the blankets. Children complain. Your mother mutters prayers. But gradually, miraculously, the combined warmth of 9 bodies begins to create a microclimate. The temperature under the blankets rises degree by precious degree. You're not comfortable. Comfort is for people with fireplaces and feather beds. But you're surviving. The smell, though. Let's talk about the smell. 9 unwashed bodies, bathing in winter. That's a death wish. Livestock, smoke, old rushes, and various other aromatic elements create a sensory experience that would probably kill a modern person. But you're nose blind to it. This is simply what home smells like. The children don't even notice anymore, though your brother's wife, who grew up in a slightly better off family with separate animal housing, still wrinkles her nose sometimes. Positioning battles occur throughout the night. Someone's always too hot or too cold. The children gravitate toward the warmest spots like heat-seeking missiles. Your brother tries to claim more than his fair share of blanket. The cow decides to lie down, making the whole house shake. The pig discovers he can reach the grain storage if he stretches, leading to a midnight intervention that requires someone, you, to get up and secure the feed. The embers glow like demon eyes in the darkness, and you know that your survival through this night depends on keeping those eyes open. Fire management isn't just a skill, It's an art form, a science, and sometimes feels like witchcraft. You've been tending fires since you were old enough to understand that cold kills and fire saves, but every night still feels like a test. Your fuel situation is, to put it mildly, desperate. The Lord's Forest is off limits for wood gathering except on specific days, and taking so much as a fallen branch without permission could cost you a hand. So you make do with what you can legally gather. Dead wood from the common lands, which is usually wet, rotten, or picked clean by your neighbours. You supplement with dried cow dung, burn slow and steady once you get past the smell. Peat cut from the bog, smoky but reliable, and anything else combustible. Old thatch, broken furniture, sometimes even dried bones from butchering. The mainstream historical record shows that fuel rights were one of the most contentious issues in medieval villages. The quirky detail: some peasants became illegal midnight wood poachers, developing elaborate systems of signals and lookouts to steal fallen branches from the Lord's forest. You've never done this yourself, of course. That bundle of suspiciously fresh oak hidden under the old thatch is definitely just wood you found on common land. Definitely. Banking a fire is where the real skill comes in. You can't just let it burn freely. That would consume your entire winter fuel supply in a week. Instead, you've mastered the art of controlling oxygen flow. Large logs get partially buried in ash. Smaller sticks are arranged in specific patterns that slow combustion. You even know how to read the smoke. White smoke means too much moisture. Black smoke means incomplete combustion. And that thin blue smoke, that's the sweet spot. Maximum heat with minimum fuel consumption. Your tools are primitive but effective. A poker made from a branch hardened in the fire itself. A small shovel hammered out by the village blacksmith in exchange for 3 chickens. Highway robbery, but what choice did you have? And your most prized possession, a fire cover. Essentially, a large piece of pottery with holes that fits over the embers to control airflow. Your grandmother left it to you, and you guard it more carefully than anything else you own. The night routine is sacred. Every few hours, someone needs to check the fire. Too long between checks and it might die completely. Too frequent and you disturb the carefully maintained conditions. You've developed an internal clock, waking at roughly 2-hour intervals without any need for actual timekeeping. Your body knows when the fire needs attention, usually right when you've finally gotten warm and comfortable. Getting up to tend the fire is torture. You extract yourself from the human pile carefully, trying not to wake everyone. Impossible. At least 3 people grumble and shift. The air outside the blankets hits like a physical assault. Your breath fogs immediately. Your bare feet hit the rush-covered floor, and you suppress a yelp. Speed is essential. Check the embers. Add a small piece of fuel if needed. Adjust the banking, and dive back into bed before your body temperature drops too much. The type of wood matters more than rich people realize. Oak burns hot and long but is jealously guarded by the Lord's foresters. Ash burns even when green, a miracle when everything is damp. Birch burns fast but bright, good for quick morning fires. Pine and fir are full of resin. They spark and pop dangerously, but smell nice. You've become a connoisseur of combustion, able to identify wood by its smoke smell alone. But here's where it gets interesting and dangerous. Historians still debate how many peasants died from carbon monoxide poisoning versus freezing to death. Your house, with its smoke hole rather than a proper chimney, is basically a death trap of competing hazards. Too much ventilation and you freeze. Too little and you might not wake up. You've learned to read the warning signs. Headaches, dizziness, nausea. When the smoke hangs too low, you open the door a crack. even if it means losing precious heat. The communal fire-sharing system in your village is complex and unwritten, but absolutely vital. If someone's fire dies completely, they can request embers from neighbors, but this isn't free. There's always a payment, even if it's just future reciprocation. You keep mental tabs on who owes whom fire debt. The widow 3 houses down gave you embers last winter when your youngest was sick and you fell asleep without banking properly. You've been paying that back with extra fuel donations ever since. Some nights, when the cold is particularly brutal, you implement emergency measures. Heated stones from around the hearth get wrapped in cloth and placed at the foot of the bed pile. Clay pots filled with embers create portable heat sources. Though you have to be careful, more than one peasant has burned down their hovel trying to bring fire to bed. You've heard of wealthy merchants in towns using metal bed warmers, but that's fantasy luxury from your perspective. The fire tells stories in the darkness. The way flames dance creates shadows that your tired mind turns into shapes, devils and saints, animals and angels. Your children are convinced they can see the future in the ember patterns. Your mother swears she can tell weather changes by how the smoke rises. Maybe they're right. When you've spent every winter night of your life staring at fire, you start to notice patterns that city folks would dismiss as superstition. You pull your cloak tighter and feel the weight of it. 4 layers of cloth and wool that represent your entire defense against death by freezing. Getting dressed in medieval times isn't about fashion. It's about engineering a personal fortress against the cold, using materials that would make modern outdoor enthusiasts weep with sympathy. Your wardrobe is your armor, and like any armor, it's heavy, complicated, and absolutely essential. Let's start with the base layer, your linen undergarments. Linen against the skin might seem counterintuitive when you're trying to stay warm, but there's method to this madness. Linen wicks moisture away from your body, and wet skin loses heat 25 times faster than dry skin. You don't know the science, but you know that the linen shift you've worn for 3 weeks straight, washing clothes in winter is basically impossible, keeps you drier than wool would. It's also easier to delouse, which matters when you're sharing your clothes with an entire ecosystem of tiny roommates. Over the linen comes the wool, layer after layer of it. Your tunic is wool, your hose are wool, your cloak is wool. Sheep are basically walking insulation factories, and you're grateful for every bleating one of them. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval peasants wore wool almost exclusively for outer garments. The quirky detail? The quality of wool varied dramatically. You're wearing the coarse, scratchy stuff that feels like wearing a hair shirt. The soft, fine wool goes to make cloth for the nobility. Your wool still has bits of hay and probably some sheep dung embedded in it. But it's warm, and that's all that matters. The layering system you use would actually impress modern mountaineers. Multiple thin layers trap air between them, creating insulation. You've got your linen shift, a wool under tunic, your main tunic, and then your cloak. On the coldest days, you add a surcoat, basically a sleeveless tunic that goes over everything else. Each layer traps warm air, creating a personal microclimate. The downside, you look like a walking laundry pile, and movement becomes increasingly difficult with each layer. Your hose, those leg coverings that modern people would call tights, are a constant source of irritation. They're separate legs that tie to your belt, and they never stay up properly. The ties dig in, the wool stretches when wet, and there's always a gap somewhere letting cold air in. Historians still debate whether medieval hose were designed by someone who hated peasants, or whether they're just the best solution possible with available technology. You suspect the former, especially when you're retying them for the 5th time today. Footwear is where things get really desperate. Your boots are leather, which sounds good until you realize it's the cheapest, thinnest leather available, probably from that cow that died of mysterious causes last summer. The leather is stuffed with straw for insulation and wrapped with cloth strips to keep everything together. In wet weather, they become sodden masses that freeze solid at night. You sleep with them under the blankets, not out of affection, but because frozen boots are impossible to put on and can cost you toes. Your cloak is your most valuable possession after your fire-starting tools. It's wool, thick and heavy. Treated with lanolin to be somewhat water-resistant, it doubles as a blanket, triples as a ground cover, and occasionally serves as an emergency roof patch. The hood is deep enough to create a cave of warmth around your face. You've patched it so many times that it's more patch than original cloth. Each repair telling a story of survival. Accessories matter more than you'd think. Your hood isn't attached to the cloak. It's a separate piece that covers your head and shoulders. This might seem inefficient, but it means you can adjust your head covering without removing your cloak. Your mittens, not gloves, those are for people who don't need their fingers, are wool lined with a rabbit fur from that lucky catch last spring. They're connected by a long string that runs through your sleeves so you won't lose them. Lose a mitten in winter, and you might lose the hand. The hat situation is serious business. Heat loss through your head can kill you, so you wear a linen coif, basically a tight-fitting cap, under a wool hood under your cloak hood. Triple-layered head protection might seem excessive until you remember that your hair is also a breeding ground for lice, and the coif helps contain them. Plus, the multiple layers create that all-important trapped air insulation. Color matters, though not for fashion reasons. Dark colors absorb more heat from the sun, so your cloak is the darkest brown the cheap dyes could produce. It looks like mud, which is fitting since it's often covered in actual mud. The wealthy wear bright colors, reds and blues and greens that shout their ability to afford expensive dyes. You wear the colors of earth and sheep and survival. Getting dressed is a morning ordeal that would test anyone's patience. Everything is cold. The clothes are stiff with frost if they got damp. Pulling wool over wool creates enough static to make your hair stand on end, if it wasn't already matted flat under your coif. The layers have to go on in the right order or nothing fits properly. And once you're dressed, you're committed. Taking layers off means getting cold, so you suffer through overheating indoors rather than risk the chill. Here's something historians argue about. Did medieval peasants sleep clothed or naked? The answer, from your practical experience, is it depends. Summer. You might strip to your linen. Dead of winter. You're sleeping in everything except your boots and cloak. The romantic notion of naked medieval peasants tumbling in the hay is exactly that. A romantic notion by people who've never tried to get naked in a house where water freezes indoors. Your stomach growls, reminding you that staying warm isn't just about external heat, it's about stoking the internal furnace. Medieval peasant cuisine might not win any Michelin stars, but when it comes to generating body heat and surviving winter, your ancestors knew exactly what they were doing. Food isn't just sustenance, it's fuel, medicine, and sometimes the difference between waking up tomorrow or becoming another winter casualty. The star of your winter menu is pottage, that thick, hearty porridge that food historians describe as gruel, but which you know as life itself. Your pot hasn't been empty in months, maybe years. It's a perpetual stew, constantly simmering over the fire, with new ingredients added as available. Today's pottage contains barley, your main grain, dried peas, a turnip that's seen better days, some cabbage, and if you're lucky, a bit of bacon fat. The consistency is somewhere between soup and cement, thick enough that your spoon stands upright. The genius of pottage isn't its taste, which ranges from bland to actively unpleasant, but its thermal properties. Hot food raises your core temperature, and pottage retains heat like edible lava. One bowl warms you from the inside out, and the high carbohydrate content provides slow-burning energy. The mainstream historical record confirms that pottage was the primary food for medieval peasants. The quirky detail: some villages had communal pottage pots that hadn't been cleaned in decades, developing unique flavors that archaeologists describe as complex, and you'd describe as what happens when you never wash your pot. Bread is your other staple, but not the fluffy white loaves you see at the Lord's table. Your bread is dark, dense, and often contains things that aren't grain. Ground acorns when the harvest was bad, sawdust when it was really bad, and sometimes small stones from the quern. It's heavy enough to use as a weapon and hard enough to break teeth if you're not careful, but it fills your belly and provides the calories you need to generate heat. You dunk it in your pottage to soften it, creating a calorie-dense mush that would horrify modern nutritionists but keeps you alive. Ale is your primary beverage, and before you think this is about medieval peasants being constantly drunk, understand that your ale is different from modern beer. It's thick, nutritious, and only mildly alcoholic, maybe 2 to 3% alcohol. It's basically liquid bread, full of calories and B vitamins. More importantly, the brewing process makes it safer than water, which might be contaminated with things you don't want to think about. You drink it warm in winter, heated by plunging a hot poker from the fire into your mug, creating a satisfying hiss and a drink that warms you twice, once from the temperature, once from the alcohol. Meat is rare but precious. When you do have it, every part gets used. That pig you slaughtered in November has been parceled out to last the winter. Ham smoking in the chimney, bacon carefully rationed, blood made into black pudding, organs into various sausages. Even the bones go into the pottage pot for marrow and flavor. The fat is especially valuable, spread on bread or added to pottage for concentrated calories. Your body craves fat in winter, knowing instinctively that it's the most efficient fuel for heat generation. Preservation is its own science. Salt is expensive, so you use smoke, cold, and fermentation. Cabbages become sauerkraut, milk becomes cheese, and everything that can be dried gets hung from the rafters. Your home looks like a grotesque mobile of dangling food products, strings of dried apples, bunches of herbs, sausages, dried fish if you're near water. The smoke from your fire does double duty, keeping you warm while preserving your food supply. Historians still debate the caloric intake of medieval peasants, but from your lived experience, it varies wildly by season. Summer might bring 3,000 calories a day during harvest. Winter, you're lucky to get 1,500, and everyone counts. You've learned to eat strategically. Biggest meal at midday when you can digest better. Hot pottage before bed to warm you for sleep. Your body has adapted to extract every possible nutrient from your limited diet. The spices and herbs in your food aren't for flavor. They're medicine and heat generators. Mustard seeds, when you can get them, create internal warmth. Wild garlic fights off winter illnesses. Sage and thyme aren't just seasonings. They're respiratory aids for smoke-filled lungs. Your mother knows 100 combinations of herbs for different ailments. Knowledge passed down through generations of women who understood that the kitchen and the pharmacy were the same room. Here's where it gets interesting. Fasting days. The church mandates numerous fast days when meat is forbidden, which sounds like additional hardship, but actually serves a purpose. It forces dietary variety and prevents you from burning through your meat stores too quickly. Fish, when available, provides different nutrients. More importantly, the communal nature of fasting creates solidarity. Everyone's equally hungry on fast days. Your eating implements are basic: a wooden bowl, a spoon carved from horn, and your knife, the one metal tool you own. Forks are for effete nobility. You eat with your hands and spoon. The communal nature of eating generates its own warmth. Everyone crowds around the pot, bodies pressed together, sharing heat and food. The children get fed first, then the elderly, then working adults. It's not politeness, it's survival logic. The timing of meals follows daylight and work patterns. Breaking your fast happens when there's enough light to see your food. The main meal comes at midday when temperatures peak. Supper is early, eaten while there's still daylight to save on rush lights. After dark, you might gnaw on hard bread or dried fruit, but cooking is done for the day. The fire needs to last for heat, not cooking. A low moo echoes through your home, and you glance over at Bessie, your personal biological space heater and the most valuable member of your household after your family. She shifts her weight, and the entire house trembles slightly. Living with animals isn't some quaint pastoral choice. It's a carefully calculated survival strategy that means the difference between comfort and catastrophe during the long winter nights are: your cow generates roughly the same amount of heat as 10 candles burning constantly, except she doesn't require wicks, won't set your thatch on fire, and produces milk as a bonus. She stands in her corner, separated from your living space by that knee-high wattle partition that does absolutely nothing to contain her smell, but at least prevents her from stepping on sleeping children. The heat radiating from her massive body creates a warm zone that extends several feet in each direction. On the coldest nights, the children mysteriously migrate toward her side of the house, drawn by invisible thermodynamics. The sleeping arrangements with animals require delicate negotiation. Bessie has her spot, and heaven help anyone who tries to move her. She's been standing in that exact corner for 3 winters now, and the packed earth beneath her has been compressed into something approaching concrete. The goats huddle together in their pen, their body heat creating a microclimate that smells like a combination of wet dog and cheese. The pig, well, the pig thinks he should sleep with the humans and makes his opinion known through persistent grunting and escape attempts. Here's the mainstream historical fact. Keeping livestock indoors was standard practice across medieval Europe, from Scotland to Sicily. But here's the quirky detail historians love to debate. Some animals were actually trained to lie down at specific times to maximize heat distribution. You've been working on this with Bessie for 2 years. She'll lie down around midnight, transforming from a standing heater to a prone furnace, and the temperature in your hovel noticeably rises. The chickens roost in the rafters, adding their small contribution to the overall heat, while occasionally blessing the inhabitants below with droppings. You've learned to position the sleeping areas strategically to avoid these midnight gifts. The birds also serve as living alarm clocks, though their sense of timing leaves much to be desired. Nothing quite ruins your night like a confused rooster deciding 3 hours after sunset is dawn. Managing animal waste in winter is its own special hell. The straw in the animal area needs changing, but removing it means opening the door and letting in Arctic air. So you've developed a layering system, new straw on top of old, building up a fermentation pile that generates its own heat. By spring, your floor level has risen by a foot, and the bottom layers have composted into rich fertilizer. The smell is indescribable, but the heat generation is real. Some historians argue about whether this was intentional or just peasants being lazy about mucking out. Having lived it, you can confirm it's absolutely intentional, that fermenting straw is basically a biological floor heater. The daily routine of animal care in winter follows strict patterns designed to minimize heat loss. Milking happens right there in the house. No trudging to a cold barn for you. The milk is still warm from Bessie's body, and you drink some immediately, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. The rest gets processed into cheese or butter, activities that happen by the fire where the temperature is high enough for the milk to culture properly. Feeding the animals is a delicate balance. They need enough food to maintain body heat, but your supplies are limited. The hay you stored in the loft has to last until spring, and you eye the diminishing pile nervously. The animals get the stalks and chaff, while any grain heads that escape threshing go to human food. Nothing is wasted. Even the dust at the bottom of the hay pile gets mixed with water to make a thin gruel for the chickens. The unexpected benefit of living with animals is the early warning system they provide. Bessie gets restless before storms. The goats bleat differently when predators are near. The pig's behavior predicts temperature drops with uncanny accuracy. You've learned to read these signs like a living barometer. When all the animals huddle together more closely than usual, you know a serious cold snap is coming and add extra fuel to the fire. Water for the animals presents its own challenges. It freezes solid in buckets overnight, requiring morning ice breaking that sends shock waves of cold up your arms. You've positioned the water containers near the hearth, but not so close that the animals knock them over trying to reach them. Spilled water in winter doesn't just mean a mess. It means dangerous ice on your floor and wet bedding that could prove fatal. The relationship between human and animal body heat creates fascinating microclimates in your home. The warmest spot isn't actually by the fire. It's in the corner where human and animal heat converges, creating a pocket of almost comfortable temperature. Your youngest has claimed this spot, curling up against the wattle partition where Bessie's warmth seeps through. You've caught him talking to the cow in the middle of the night, sharing secrets with his massive, patient heat source. Some nights, when the cold is particularly brutal, the boundaries between human and animal space break down entirely. The goats escape their pen and join the human sleeping pile. The pig manages to nose his way under the blankets. Even the semi-feral barn cat that usually disdains human contact appears from wherever she hides during the day and curls up on someone's chest. It's like Noah's Ark. If the Ark was a one-room hovel and Noah's main concern was not freezing to death. The knock on your door comes just after dawn, 3 quick raps followed by 2 slow ones. It's the village signal for "I need fire." Your neighbor Thomas stands outside, frost in his beard, carrying a clay pot with dead ashes. His fire died in the night, and now he's making the rounds, part of an elaborate social network that keeps everyone alive through winter. You scoop some glowing embers into his pot, knowing that next week, or next month, you might be the one making the cold walk between houses. This is how medieval villages really worked, not as collections of independent households, but as interconnected survival networks, where heat, food, and labor were shared commodities. The Lord might own the land, but the peasants own the intricate web of mutual obligations that actually keeps everyone breathing through January. You're part of at least 6 different sharing arrangements, each with its own unwritten rules and social hierarchies. The fire sharing system is the most critical. Every morning, someone walks the village paths checking smoke from chimneys. No smoke means trouble. The mainstream historical record shows that medieval villages had sophisticated mutual aid systems. But here's the quirky detail. Some villages had designated firekeepers, usually elderly women who maintained especially reliable hearths and served as the emergency backup for everyone else. Your village has old Margaret, who hasn't let her fire die in 15 years and guards her status like a dragon guards gold. Wood gathering operates on a complex rotation system. Families take turns watching for the Lord's foresters, creating diversions while others quickly gather fallen branches from forbidden areas. It's not technically theft if the wood is already on the ground, you tell yourself. Though the foresters might disagree, the gathered wood goes into a communal pile, distributed based on a formula that considers family size, sick members, and past contributions. Arguments over wood distribution cause more winter fights than anything else. The church serves as the ultimate communal warming station. On Sundays, everyone crams into the stone building, body heat raising the temperature to almost comfortable levels. The wise arrive early to claim spots near the pillars, which retain heat from the previous week. The truly clever bring cushions, not for comfort, but for insulation from the cold stone. Mass might save your soul, but more immediately, it warms your body for a precious hour. Labor sharing intensifies in winter, when your roof needs emergency patching after a storm. 8 neighbors appear with tools and materials. When the widow Ellen's cow goes into difficult labor, the village midwife works on the cow while everyone else reinforces her walls against the wind. Every shared labor creates a debt, carefully tracked in the collective memory. You help thresh Robert's grain in autumn. Now he owes you 3 days of wood chopping. These debts are better than currency. They're survival insurance. The mill presents its own heat-sharing opportunity. Grinding grain generates warmth, and the mill becomes a social hub on grinding days. Families time their grain processing for the coldest days, lingering in the relative warmth while gossiping and planning. The miller, fat from skimming everyone's grain, maintains the warmest building in the village. Everyone hates him for his theft, but everyone visits him for his heat. Historians still debate how much medieval peasants actually cooperated versus competed. But from your lived experience, it's both. You share fire with Thomas today, but you also remember when he tried to claim more than his share of common pasture last summer. The same neighbor who helps patch your roof might also redirect water runoff toward your garden. Community survival requires cooperation, but that doesn't mean you trust everyone equally. The sharing of food follows strict protocols. When someone slaughters an animal, fresh meat gets distributed quickly. No refrigeration means use it or lose it. The family keeps the organs and blood. They spoil fastest. While muscle meat goes to neighbors who reciprocate when they slaughter. This creates a steady trickle of fresh protein through the village instead of feast or famine cycles. Of course, everyone keeps careful mental track of who got which cuts, and perceived unfairness festers through generations. Communal ovens, where they exist, become heat-sharing focal points. Your village doesn't have one. That's for richer settlements. But you've heard tales of villages where families coordinate baking schedules to maximize heat retention. The last family of the day gets to sleep near the cooling oven. absorbing residual warmth through the night. It sounds like paradise from where you're sitting in your smoky hovel. Information sharing might not seem heat-related, but knowledge saves lives in winter. When old Catherine discovers that packing wet straw around the house foundation prevents ground cold from seeping in, word spreads within days. When young William figures out that hanging a dead crow in the rafters keeps other birds from nesting and dropping waste on your head, everyone has a dead crow by week's end. Some ideas work, some don't. But the constant experimentation and communication creates collective wisdom. The darkest part of communal survival involves deciding who doesn't get saved. When fuel runs desperately low, when food stores dwindle, quiet calculations happen. The elderly sometimes stop eating, claiming they're not hungry. The terminally ill find themselves in the coldest corners. It's not cruelty, it's mathematics. Save those who can work come spring, or everyone dies. These decisions happen without discussion, through subtle repositioning and resource allocation that everyone understands but no one acknowledges. Your place in these networks determines your survival chances. The blacksmith and miller are essential, so they never lack for fire or food. The village priest theoretically stands outside the system, but somehow never goes cold or hungry. You're a middling farmer with a reputation for reliability, which puts you squarely in the worth-saving category. For now, the church bell tolls, calling you to Mass. But you know the real draw isn't just salvation, it's the promise of warmth in those stone walls. You bundle up the family, securing the animals and banking the fire carefully. The quarter-mile walk to the church feels like an Arctic expedition, wind cutting through every gap in your clothing. But you go, because the Church of St. Margaret's offers something your hovel can't: thick stone walls that trap heat, and a congregation of bodies that transforms the space into something approaching comfortable. As you push through the heavy wooden doors, the temperature difference hits immediately. It's not warm, exactly, but it's significantly less cold. The church's design is deceptively clever. Those massive stone walls that look like fortress fortifications actually serve as thermal mass, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly through the night. The narrow windows minimize heat loss while the barrel-vaulted ceiling traps warm air. Medieval architects might not have understood thermodynamics, but they understood comfort. You've arrived early enough to claim a spot near one of the pillars. These massive columns are heat sinks, still radiating warmth from last Sunday's packed service. The truly privileged have brought cushions, not for comfort, but as insulation from the stone floor that seems to actively suck heat from your body. Your family clusters together on the bare stone, creating your own small heat island in the larger ocean of relative warmth. The mainstream historical record confirms that churches served as community warming centers. But here's the quirky detail. Some parishes actually scheduled extra services during cold snaps, ostensibly for additional prayer, but really to give peasants more chances to warm up. Your priest, Father Benedict, is shrewd enough to understand that frozen parishioners can't tithe, so he finds theological justifications for gathering whenever the temperature drops dangerously low. The service begins, and the church fills with bodies. Steam rises from damp wool clothing, creating a fog that mingles with incense smoke. The smell is indescribable. Wet dog mixed with unwashed humans, old incense, and that particular mustiness that comes from centuries of accumulated prayer and perspiration. But you barely notice because the temperature is rising. Hundreds of bodies, each generating heat, transform the stone box into something almost cozy. The positioning politics in church are complex. The Lord's family, has enclosed pews near the chancel, complete with charcoal braziers, because apparently even God recognizes social hierarchy. Prosperous peasants claim spots along the walls where they can lean against the heat-retaining stone. The poor and late arrivals pack into the center, where body heat is highest, but comfort is lowest. You're middle ranking, which means you get wall access but have to stand for the entire service. Father Benedict's sermons in winter have a particular character. He speaks of hellfire with unusual enthusiasm, describing the eternal flames in loving detail that makes everyone unconsciously lean forward. His descriptions of the warmth of God's love take on very literal meanings. When he talks about the fires of purgatory, you catch several parishioners looking almost wistful. Theological metaphors about warmth and cold, light and darkness, resonate differently when you're actively trying not to freeze. Historians still argue about whether medieval peasants were genuinely pious or just pragmatically religious. From your perspective, it's both. You absolutely believe in God, saints, and salvation. You also absolutely come to church partly because it's warm. These aren't contradictory positions. God provides warmth through stone walls and community gathering just as surely as through miraculous intervention. The singing portion of Mass serves multiple purposes. Hymns require deep breathing, which warms you from the inside. Standing and sitting repeatedly gets blood flowing to extremities. The physical act of singing generates heat, while creating a sense of community warmth that's almost tangible. When hundreds of voices join in pangalingua, the combined breath actually raises the ambient temperature measurably. After formal services, the church serves other warming functions. The side chapels become gathering spots where women share gossip and warmth, while ostensibly praying to various saints. Men cluster near the main door, discussing village business while absorbing residual heat. Children play quiet games in corners, their bodies generating more heat through movement. Father Benedict tolerates these activities because he knows empty churches don't generate tithes. The church floor itself tells stories about heat-seeking behavior. The stones near heat sources are worn smooth from generations of peasants positioning themselves strategically. There are actual grooves where people have stood in the same spots winter after winter. The area right in front of the altar, where candles burn continuously, shows the most wear, not from excessive piety, but from people finding excuses to pray very slowly in the warmest spot. Some enterprising souls have developed entire routines around church warmth. They arrive early for private prayer, near the candles, stay for Mass, body heat, linger for confession, enclosed space with another person, and volunteer for any task that keeps them in the building. Old Martha has been cleaning the same section of floor for 3 hours, moving at a pace that would make glaciers impatient. No one says anything because everyone understands. The real miracle of church heating happens during feast day vigils. All-night prayer sessions mean the church stays packed and warm through the darkest hours. Yes, you're supposed to be contemplating divine mysteries, but you're mostly contemplating the divine mystery of how 50 bodies in an enclosed space can raise the temperature to actually comfortable levels. These vigils are suspiciously well attended during January and February, less so in July. Summer feels like a distant dream as you huddle by your hearth, but the memory of those long, warm days drives home a brutal truth. Surviving winter begins the moment the last snow melts. You're not living through winter so much as constantly preparing for the next one, and that preparation consumes every warm month with desperate efficiency. The grasshopper and ant fable might as well be your village's motto. Except everyone here knows what happens to grasshoppers. They freeze. Your fuel gathering starts before the ground fully thaws. Dead wood from winter storms needs collecting before it rots, or your neighbors get it first. The common lands become a battlefield of competing gatherers, everyone eyeing the same fallen branches. You've developed a system with your brothers. One watches for the Lord's foresters while others drag wood to hidden caches. It's exhausting work that would be illegal if anyone caught you. But the alternative is freezing next January. The peat cutting begins in late spring when the bog dries enough to work. You wade into the marsh with your specially shaped spade, carving blocks of compressed plant matter that will become next winter's fuel. Each block needs cutting, stacking, turning, and drying through the summer months. A good day yields maybe 50 blocks. You need thousands. The mathematics of survival are simple and terrifying. Every day spent on other tasks is less fuel for winter. Here's the mainstream historical fact. Medieval peasants typically spent between 30 to 40% of their summer labor on winter preparation. But here's the quirky detail historians love to argue about. Some villages had elaborate fuel-sharing agreements where families specialized in different fuel types. The marsh dwellers cut peat. The forest edge families gathered wood. And those near animal pastures collected dung. It was essentially a medieval energy economy, complete with exchange rates. 3 baskets of dried dung for 1 of good oak wood. Dung collecting might sound like the worst job, but dried animal droppings burn steady and long. You follow the cattle through summer pastures, collecting their droppings in baskets. Fresh dung gets shaped into flat cakes and laid out to dry on specially built racks. Your children help, though they complain about the smell. You remind them that come January, they'll be grateful for every piece. The irony isn't lost on you. The same animals that will warm your house with their bodies also provide fuel for your fire. The thatching work happens in high summer when the straw is driest. Your roof needs constant maintenance, and major repairs can't wait until winter reveals the leaks. You spend days on the roof under the burning sun, laying new courses of thatch, knowing that each properly placed bundle might prevent heat loss that could kill. The children pass up bundles while your wife criticizes your technique from below. Everyone's an expert when they're not balanced on slippery roof beams. Wood storage requires its own architecture. Wet wood is useless wood, so you build elaborate stacks designed to shed rain while allowing air circulation. The best wood stays undercover near the house. Secondary supplies hide in various caches, some legal, some decidedly not. You've learned to build hollow haystacks that conceal stolen wood from the Lord's forest. If discovered, you'll claim ignorance, though the penalty for wood theft can include mutilation. The autumn nutting season sends everyone into the forest for legal gathering. Acorns, chestnuts, and beech nuts aren't just pig food. Ground into flour, they supplement grain supplies. More importantly, the fallen branches around nut trees are fair game for gathering. You compete with wild boars and other villagers for the best spots. Children climb trees to shake down nuts, while adults gather everything useful from the forest floor. Hay cutting for animal fodder doubles as insulation gathering. The lowest quality hay, full of weeds and thistles, gets stuffed into wall gaps and laid in the loft as extra insulation. It's scratchy, harbors mice, and smells like a barn, but it's another barrier against the cold. You've learned to pack it carefully. Too tight, and it rots. Too loose, and it settles, leaving gaps for wind. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants truly understood insulation principles or just stumbled onto effective techniques. Living it, you can confirm it's both. You know that dry grass keeps warmth in, even if you can't explain why. You've noticed that snow on the roof means good insulation, while bare patches mean heat loss. This knowledge gets passed down through proverbs and practical demonstration rather than scientific explanation. The preservation work intensifies as autumn progresses. Every cabbage needs fermenting into sauerkraut. Apples get sliced and dried. Beans and peas hang in bunches from rafters. Your home becomes a preservation factory. Every surface covered with drying food. The smoke from your fire does triple duty: warmth, cooking, and preservation. You'll be finding dried apple rings in unexpected places come February. The final pre-winter push feels like preparing for a siege, which essentially it is. Last-minute repairs to walls and shutters. Final fuel gathering before the ground freezes. Checking and double-checking food stores. The children help by collecting moss and dried grass for stuffing gaps. Your wife organizes the supplies with military precision. She knows exactly how many days of food you have, how much fuel at current burn rates, how long everything needs to last. Some years you're ready when the first snow falls. Other years, winter arrives early and catches you scrambling. The prepared families survive relatively comfortably. The unprepared beg, borrow, or die. There's no margin for error, no backup plan beyond the village support network. Every summer day spent drinking ale instead of gathering fuel might cost you in January. It's a harsh calculation that governs every moment of the warm months. The shadows dance across your walls as the fire flickers, and your mother crosses herself, muttering protection against the demons that everyone knows grow stronger in winter's darkness. The practical and the supernatural intertwine in your daily survival strategies, creating a complex web of beliefs where knowing which wood burns longest is just as important as knowing which saints protect against freezing. Your world isn't divided between superstition and science. It's all one desperate attempt to survive until spring. The cold brings out creatures that summer keeps at bay, not wolves or bears. Those are straightforward dangers you can plan for. Well, winter brings the supernatural threats, demons that steal breath from sleeping children, spirits that douse fires in the night, and the wild hunt that rides through December skies seeking souls. You nail iron horseshoes above your door, not just for luck, but because everyone knows cold iron repels evil. The fact that the metal also conducts heat from inside, creating a slightly warmer spot on the door, is just coincidence. Or is it? Your protection rituals begin at sunset. Salt, precious, expensive salt, gets sprinkled on the threshold because demons can't cross it. You can't afford much, so you mix it with ash from the hearth, telling yourself the blessed fire adds its own protection. A sprig of rowan hangs above where the baby sleeps, and dried vervain is tucked into the thatch above your bed. These aren't empty superstitions to you. They're as essential as banking the fire properly. The mainstream historical record shows that medieval peasants lived in a world where Christian beliefs merged seamlessly with older pagan practices. But here's the quirky detail. Some winter warming techniques were disguised as religious rituals. Processing around the house with candles on Candlemas wasn't just about blessing your home. It was about checking for drafts and gaps where cold and demons could enter. The holy water sprinkled on walls revealed cracks where it froze, showing where repairs were needed. St. Blaise protects against throat ailments and choking, which is why you keep his medal near the fire. Throat problems from smoke inhalation are deadly in winter. St. Barbara guards against lightning and fire, so her image painted on the hearthstones isn't just decoration. St. Christopher protects travelers, and anyone venturing out in a blizzard needs all the help they can get. Your saints are specialists, each handling specific winter dangers. The Christmas season brings its own protective magic. The Yule log isn't just a big piece of wood, it's a shield against evil for the coming year. You carefully selected it during summer, marking an oak trunk that would burn slow and steady. Part of last year's log starts this year's fire, creating an unbroken chain of protection. The ash gets saved and scattered in the fields come spring, completing the cycle. Historians debate whether this was originally a pagan practice, but you don't care about origins, you care that it works. Your mother knows weather signs that would impress modern meteorologists. When she says snow is coming because the cat's been sleeping with her paw over her nose, she's usually right. The ring around the moon tells her how many days until the storm. The behavior of smoke from the chimney predicts wind changes. Is it supernatural knowledge or careful observation? The distinction doesn't matter when accuracy keeps you alive. The wise woman in the village, Old Marjorie, sells charms that everyone swears by. Her warming stones, regular rocks with symbols carved on them, heated in the fire and wrapped in cloth, work exactly as well as any heated stone would. But the prayers she mutters over them, the specific wrapping pattern she insists on, the warnings about only heating them during certain moon phases, that's what makes them special. The placebo effect is powerful when you're desperate for warmth. Dreams carry weight in winter darkness. Dreaming of fire means someone in the family will have fever. Dreaming of ice means a death is coming. Dreaming of spring flowers. Well, that just means you're hungry and cold like everyone else. But you pay attention to dreams because sometimes they carry warnings. Your grandmother dreamed of wolves 3 nights before the pack attacked the sheepfold. Coincidence? Maybe. But you still listen when someone mentions their dreams. The evil eye becomes more powerful in winter when people huddle together in close quarters. Jealousy over food stores. Resentment about fuel allocations. Envy of warmer homes. These emotions fester in the darkness. You're careful not to boast about your relatively good fortune, not to mention the extra grain hidden in the loft or the secret wood cache. Drawing envy draws the evil eye, and in winter, any bad luck could be fatal. Historians still argue about how much medieval peasants actually believed versus how much was social performance. But huddled in your freezing hovel, the distinction becomes meaningless. When hanging iron scissors open above the door keeps both demons and drafts out, the metal conducts heat and the open scissors create tiny air currents that supposedly confuse evil spirits. You don't question the mechanism. Results matter more than explanations. The Church officially frowns on many of these practices, but Father Benedict turns a blind eye to the rowan branches and muttered charms. He knows that banning folk practices won't stop them, and besides, some of them actually work. He's even been known to bless the occasional warming stone or suggest that praying to St. Lawrence, who was roasted alive, while standing near the fire might help with the cold. Practical theology for practical problems. The rhythm of your day changes completely when darkness falls at 4 in the afternoon and won't lift until 8 the next morning. 16 hours of darkness means 16 hours where outdoor work becomes impossible, dangerous, or both. But idle hands don't generate heat, and idle bodies cool dangerously fast. So you've developed an intricate choreography of indoor activities designed to keep blood flowing, fingers moving, and minds occupied while the wind howls outside. Your workbench, really just a plank across 2 barrels, becomes the center of evening activity. Whittling isn't just passing time. It's creating next year's tools, spoons, bowls, and toy animals that might fetch a few pennies at the spring fair. The knife work keeps your hands moving, generating heat through fine muscle activity. Wood shavings pile at your feet. Destined for kindling or animal bedding, nothing is wasted, and everything serves multiple purposes. Your wife's spinning wheel creates its own microclimate of activity. The wool passes through her fingers in an endless stream. Twist and pull, twist and pull. The repetitive motion keeps her hands warm while producing thread that will become cloth, that will become clothes that will keep you alive next winter. The children card wool nearby, their small fingers learning the rhythm. It's meditation, exercise, and productivity rolled into one. The mainstream historical fact is that textile production occupied most winter evenings for medieval women. But here's the quirky detail. Spinning circles often developed synchronized breathing patterns, everyone inhaling and exhaling together, which actually raised the ambient temperature of the room through collective breath warming. Your wife swears the thread spins better when everyone breathes together. And who are you to argue with results? Storytelling becomes high art on these endless nights. Your repertoire includes tales passed down through generations, mixing Christian parables with older stories that nobody admits are pagan anymore. The best storytellers know how to pace their tales, building tension that makes listeners lean forward, hearts racing, bodies warming through excitement. Your uncle tells the story of the wild hunt so well that everyone's pulse pounds, generating heat through pure adrenaline. Dancing happens even in your cramped space. Not the courtly dances of nobility, but stomping, clapping affairs that get blood pumping to extremities. Someone drums on an overturned pot while others sing. The children spin until they're dizzy and warm. Your elderly mother taps her feet from her seat by the fire, claiming her dancing days are over, but still moving enough to keep the cold at bay. These impromptu celebrations serve no purpose except survival, which is purpose enough. Historians debate whether medieval peasants were constantly miserable or found joy despite circumstances. Living it, you know both are true. The misery is real. Your back aches. Your stomach growls. Your fingers are never quite warm. But the joy is real too. Your daughter's laughter as she learns a new spinning technique. The satisfaction of a perfectly carved spoon. The moment when a story reaches its climax and everyone gasps together. The mending never ends. Every piece of cloth in your household has been repaired multiple times, or patches on patches, darns over darns. But the work serves multiple purposes, preserving precious textiles, keeping hands busy, and creating thicker, warmer garments through layers of repair. Your wife's needle flashes in the firelight as she reinforces seams that will need to withstand another year of hard wear. The children practice on scraps, learning skills they'll need to survive their own winters. Food preparation becomes evening entertainment. Grinding grain with the hand quern creates warmth through exercise. The rhythmic sound becomes background music to conversations. Preparing vegetables for tomorrow's pottage keeps hands busy while allowing talk to flow. The children sort beans, picking out stones and bad ones, a job that requires just enough attention to keep them focused, but not so much they can't listen to stories. Your games are simple, but engaging. Knucklebones made from sheep ankles, a crude board scratched into a plank for various counting games, riddles that everyone knows but still enjoys. The church officially disapproves of dice games, but what Father Benedict doesn't see during his winter evenings won't hurt him. The tiny wooden dice, carved last winter, create drama and excitement that warm through emotional investment. Prayer occupies significant time, but it's active prayer, standing, kneeling, crossing yourself, all movements that prevent blood from pooling. The rosary beads sliding through fingers maintain circulation. Evening prayers become family calisthenics disguised as devotion. The children mumble along, more focused on staying warm than salvation. But the routine provides structure to shapeless winter nights. Music fills the darkness. Your wooden flute, carved 3 winters ago, produces reedy notes that dance with the smoke. Your wife sings lullabies that become work songs that become dancing tunes. The children clap along, their small hands generating heat through impact. Even your attempts at harmony, enthusiastic if not skillful, raise spirits and temperatures simultaneously. The tactical use of movement can't be overstated. Every hour, someone needs to check the animals, stir the pottage, adjust the fire, or fetch something from the far corner. These tasks get distributed to ensure nobody sits still too long. Your mother, despite her complaints about creaking joints, takes her turn. Movement is life, stillness is death. It's that simple. The bedtime routine begins hours before actual sleep. Gradual winding down, banking the fire, final trips to the chamber pot, arranging tomorrow's clothes to warm by the dying embers. The transition from active evening to passive night must be managed carefully. Too sudden and bodies cool dangerously. Too gradual and precious fuel burns unnecessarily. You've perfected this dance over countless winters, each movement purposeful and practiced. Your mother hasn't risen from her pallet in 3 days. The cough that started as a tickle in autumn has become a wet, rattling thing that shakes her frail frame. She needs warmth most of all, but she's too weak to maintain it herself. This is when your community's informal triage system kicks in. The unspoken but absolutely rigid protocols for keeping the vulnerable alive through winter's worst. The sleeping arrangements reorganize themselves around her needs. She gets the warmest spot, closest to the fire but not so close that sparks might reach her bedding. Your children surrender their coveted positions without being asked, understanding instinctively that grandmother's survival takes precedence. The family sleeping pile reshapes itself into a protective cocoon around her, everyone contributing body heat to the cause. Your wife takes charge of the heating stones, smooth river rocks that hold warmth beautifully. Every few hours, she wraps freshly heated stones in scraps of wool and tucks them around your mother's body. At her feet, near her hands, one precious stone wrapped in the softest cloth against her chest, where the congestion is worst. The stone rotation becomes a constant dance, ensuring she's never without a heat source while preventing burns from stones that are too hot. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval communities had sophisticated care systems for the elderly and infirm. But here's the detail that makes historians uncomfortable. These systems included quiet calculations about resource allocation. Your mother is still contributing, her knowledge, her prayers, her ability to watch the fire while others work. But everyone knows there's a line. If she stops being able to contribute anything while consuming precious food and fuel, well, those are calculations nobody discusses aloud. Old Thomas from 3 houses down hasn't been so lucky. His family is poorer, his contributions fewer, and when he took to his bed last week, the village support was notably thinner. You contributed some pottage and a small bundle of sticks, but not your best fuel, not your warmest blanket. These choices happen through silent consensus, everyone understanding but nobody acknowledging the brutal mathematics of winter survival. The herbal remedies intensify for the sick, Your wife brews concoctions that would frighten modern pharmacists. Willow bark for fever, horehound for coughs, elderberry for strength. The herbs are precious, saved from summer gathering. But illness demands their use. The mainstream medicine mixes with folk remedies, spiderwebs on wounds, prayers to Saint Roche, and that mysterious tonic from the wise woman that might be helping, or might just taste so vile that patients recover to avoid more doses. Children with winter ailments get different treatment. They're the future, worth every resource. When your nephew developed that terrifying croup cough last month, the entire extended family mobilized. Extra fuel appeared from hidden stores. The best blankets materialized. Someone even produced a tiny pot of honey, worth its weight in silver, to soothe his throat. Children can recover, will contribute future labor, represent hope. The cold calculation is kinder to them. The positioning of the sick becomes a science. Too close to the fire risks fever spikes and dehydration. Too far means dangerous chilling. The ideal spot changes with the illness. Respiratory ailments need dry heat. Fevers need careful cooling. Joint problems need consistent warmth. You've all become amateur physicians through necessity, reading symptoms and adjusting positions like chess masters planning moves. Isolation protocols exist even in your one-room hovel. When illness might be catching, the sick person gets positioned downwind of others, near the smoke hole where bad air can escape. Cloths soaked in vinegar hang between the sick and the healthy. Nobody knows why this sometimes helps, but empirical evidence over generations suggests it does. The balance between preventing spread and maintaining warming body contact requires constant adjustment. The Church's role in elder care provides another warming opportunity. Your mother insists on attending Mass despite her weakness, and the community makes it possible. Neighbors take turns supporting her on the walk. Bodies press close for warmth and stability. She gets priority positioning near the pillars that retain heat. After services, she's allowed to rest in the vestry while praying, which everyone understands means absorbing extra warmth before the journey home. Historians debate medieval attitudes toward the elderly, but living it reveals the complex truth. Respect for age coexists with practical resource management. Your mother's stories, knowledge of herb lore, and ability to maintain fires while others work make her valuable beyond sentiment. But everyone remembers what happened to Robert's father last winter, when his mind went and he kept letting the fire die. The family made him comfortable, but didn't exhaust resources on someone who couldn't contribute to survival. The night watches rotate differently when someone's ill. Instead of one person checking the fire, family members take shorter shifts to ensure the sick are never alone long. Your mother wakes confused sometimes, calling for your father who died 3 winters back. Someone's always there to soothe her, adjust her heating stones, offer sips of warm broth. The broken sleep exhausts everyone but maintains the vital warmth she can't generate alone. Food for the sick follows special rules. The best portions of meat, the thickest pottage, the rare white bread when available, all go to those fighting illness. Your mother protests, trying to pass her portions to the children, but you insist. It's not kindness, it's investment. A well-fed sick person might recover. A starved one definitely won't. The brutal logic of survival dressed in the clothing of care. Your mother will probably survive this winter. She's tough, still marginally useful, and the family has sufficient resources to support her. But everyone knows the clock is ticking. Each winter gets harder. Each illness takes longer to shake. Someday, probably soon, She'll join your father in the frozen churchyard. Until then, you'll keep her warm, fed, and valued, not just from love, though there's plenty of that, but because that's how communities survive, the weak and strong together, until they can't be. Not every brilliant idea for staying warm actually worked. Your father told stories of his uncle who tried to heat his hovel by fermenting massive amounts of cabbage indoors, thinking the fermentation heat would warm the space. The resulting explosion of gas and smell drove the family out into a blizzard, and they spent 3 days sheltering with neighbors who never let them forget the great sauerkraut catastrophe of 23. Winter desperation breeds innovation, but not all innovations deserve survival. Take the case of Robert the Clever, who earned his ironic nickname after deciding that if 1 layer of mud and dung daub on the walls was good, 6 layers would be 6 times better. He spent all autumn plastering his walls until they were nearly 2 feet thick. Come the first heavy rain, the weight collapsed his entire eastern wall. He spent winter with a canvas sheet where the wall used to be, colder than ever and significantly humbler. The mainstream historical record rarely mentions the failures, focusing on successful innovations that survived. But here's the quirky truth. For every clever heating solution, there were dozen disasters. Your village still talks about the family who tried to bring a charcoal brazier into their sealed hovel for extra warmth. They were found the next morning, all 8 of them, peacefully dead from the invisible poisonous air. Now everyone knows, charcoal burns clean but kills silent. Your own experiments haven't all been successful. Last winter, you tried creating a heat trap by hanging heavy cloths from the rafters to make a smaller space around the sleeping area. In theory, less space means easier heating. In practice, the cloths trapped smoke, collected moisture that froze into ice sheets, and eventually collapsed onto the sleeping family in the middle of the night. You still find ice-stiffened fabric scraps in odd corners. The animal heating strategies have seen spectacular failures. Your neighbor tried keeping geese inside for winter, reasoning that more birds meant more heat. Geese, it turns out, are demons in feathered form. They attacked anyone who moved, shat prodigiously and indiscriminately, and their honking made sleep impossible. After 3 nights, he released them into the winter night, preferring hypothermia to the constant assault. Half the geese died, and he spent the rest of winter significantly poorer and no warmer. Some failures came from misunderstanding how heat works. Old Martin heard that rich folks had fire under their floors, hypocore systems in Roman ruins, and decided to dig channels under his floor for hot air. Without understanding the engineering required, he essentially created a system that funneled cold air directly into his home while weakening his floor structure. The whole thing collapsed during the spring thaw, taking half his hovel with it. The quest for better fuel led to dangerous experiments. Someone always tries burning things that shouldn't be burned. Green wood that explodes with steam and sparks, or dried mushrooms that seemed like good kindling but released toxic smoke. That memorable winter when Thomas tried burning old leather scraps and created a smoke so acrid it could be smelled 3 villages away. The smell lingered in his hovel until summer, a constant reminder that not everything combustible should be combusted. Historians often romanticize medieval ingenuity, but they forget the body count. Your grandfather's generation learned the hard way that bringing too many animals inside creates dangerous air, what we'd now call carbon dioxide poisoning, but what they called the sleeping death. They learned that sealing every crack and gap might keep wind out, but also keep smoke in. They learned that ice makes terrible insulation when it melts. The communal oven experiment 3 winters back still makes people laugh. When they're not crying about the wasted resources, the village pooled materials to build a massive communal oven, thinking everyone could share the heat. Nobody considered that scheduling would be impossible, that fuel requirements would triple, or that the thing would become a massive ice block when not in use. It stands there still, a monument to good intentions and poor planning. Your personal favorite disaster was your brother's body heat amplifier, a complicated arrangement of metal plates salvaged from the blacksmith's scrap heap, positioned to reflect and concentrate body heat back onto sleepers. The theory wasn't entirely wrong, but the execution was flawed. The metal conducted cold more than it reflected heat, creating frost-covered surfaces that stuck to exposed skin. Your nephew still has scars from where his cheek froze to a plate. The herbal warming experiments produced their own casualties. Every few winters, someone discovers a new plant that creates a warming sensation. Usually, it's just irritating skin until it feels hot. Sometimes, it's actually poisonous. The winter of the itching death, when half the village rubbed themselves with what turned out to be dried poison oak, thinking the burning sensation meant warmth, remains legendary for its spectacular misery. Even successful innovations often came with unexpected consequences. Double layering the thatch kept houses warmer, but created perfect habitats for rats. Using pine resin to seal cracks worked until summer heat made it run, destroying clothes and tools. That brilliant idea of interconnecting houses to share heat created highways for fire to spread, leading to new rules about firewalls after losing 3 homes in one night. The lessons learned from failures became village wisdom, passed down in proverbs and warnings. Better cold than clever became the response to overly ambitious heating schemes. Test it on the chickens first emerged after too many poisoning incidents. If God wanted us warm, he'd have given us fur, was what the elders said when young people proposed particularly radical innovations. Conservative thinking born from generations of sometimes fatal experimentation. The ice on the inside of your walls begins to weep. At first, you think you're imagining it, after months of frozen breath crystallizing on every surface. The idea of melting seems like a fever dream. But no, there it is, a single drop of water running down the wall, leaving a clean trail through the soot. Spring is coming, and with it, a relief so profound it feels like resurrection. The signs multiply daily. The chickens start laying again, their internal clocks responding to lengthening days, even though snow still blankets the ground. Your cow's milk production increases slightly. The cats emerge from wherever they've been hibernating all winter, suddenly visible and demanding food. Most telling of all, you can stand to be outside for more than 5 minutes without feeling like death is imminent. Your fuel pile, so carefully hoarded and rationed, looks almost embarrassing in its depleted state. Those massive stacks from autumn have dwindled to a few sad bundles. But it's enough. You've made it. The great gamble of winter, that your preparations would outlast the cold, has paid off once again. The half-rotten turnips in storage, the last scraps of salted meat, the final grains of barley will stretch just far enough to reach the first spring greens. The mainstream historical record shows that medieval communities celebrated numerous spring festivals. What it doesn't capture is the visceral, physical relief of warmth returning. Your body has been clenched against cold for so long that the first truly mild day makes you feel drunk. People stumble out of their hovels, blinking in the sunlight like moles, Faces turn skyward to absorb every precious ray. The smell of your hovel, sealed and smoke-filled all winter, hits you anew as warm air allows you to finally open the door and shutters simultaneously without freezing. The mixture of smoke, unwashed bodies, animals, preserved food, and countless other odors that you've been nose-blind to comes rushing back. Time for spring cleaning, though that term doesn't capture the archaeological excavation required to find your floor again. Your mother, who you worried might not see another spring, sits outside on a bench, face turned to the sun. The cough that rattled through her chest all winter hasn't disappeared, but it's loosened. She'll make it to another harvest, probably. The children who spent months huddled inside explode outward like seeds finally allowed to sprout, running with an energy you'd forgotten they possessed. But here's the quirky, historical detail. Spring wasn't pure celebration. It was also the season of reckoning. Who didn't make it? What resources were completely exhausted? Which debts of food, fuel, or labor needed settling? The first village meeting after the thaw was part celebration, part funeral, part accounting. The empty spaces where neighbors used to stand told their own stories. The fire that saved your life all winter becomes almost an enemy as temperatures rise. You still need it for cooking and evening warmth, but the constant tending relaxes. The first night you let it die completely, actually die, not just bank, feels like sacrilege. But morning comes, and you're not frozen. And rekindling from scratch feels like luxury rather than disaster. Your animals sense the change before you do. The cow grows restless, ready for pasture instead of stale hay. The goats attempt increasingly creative escapes. Even the pig seems less interested in sleeping and more interested in rooting for fresh things. The covenant of shared warmth that kept you all alive begins to dissolve. Soon, the animals will return to their proper shed, and you'll have your hovel to just the human family again. The layers of clothing that saved your life become oppressive. First to go is the outer cloak, then the surcoat. Then one by one the tunics peel away until you're down to, wonder of wonders, a single layer. Your skin, pale as cheese from months of coverage, sees sunlight. The children have competitions to see who has the most impressive collection of flea bites and lice nits. Spring brings its own challenges. Historians debate whether medieval peasants had a concept of seasonal depression. But you don't need terms for what you feel. The lifting of winter's weight is physical, emotional, spiritual. Plans that seemed impossible in January's darkness suddenly feel achievable. Maybe this year's harvest will be better. Maybe you'll finally fix that sagging roof properly. Maybe, and this is wild optimism, you'll even get ahead on fuel gathering. The communal bonds forged by winter's necessity begin to relax. Neighbors who spent months sharing fire and food remember old grievances. The widow who hoarded her fuel while begging others charity gets cold shoulders. The family that always seemed to need more than they gave finds themselves subtly excluded from spring planning. Winter solidarity gives way to summer independence. But for now, in these first precious days of warmth, none of that matters. You stand outside your hovel, watching ice melt from your thatch, feeling sun on your face, breathing air that doesn't hurt your lungs. You've survived another winter. Your family is intact. Your animals are alive. The cycle begins again. Spring planting, summer growing, autumn harvesting, winter preparing. But for this moment, you simply exist in the space between seasons, grateful to be warm. The first night you sleep without the communal pile feels strange. Your own sleeping space, your own blanket, your wife beside you but not 3 children, and your mother pressed against you. The privacy feels decadent and slightly wrong. But as you drift off to sleep, not shivering for the first time in months, you think perhaps you could get used to this luxury, at least until next winter, when the great dance of survival begins again. And now, as our tale of winter survival comes to its close, let the images of those hardy souls fade gently from your mind. Think of your own warm bed, your heating that comes at the touch of a button, your walls that keep the cold at bay without constant vigilance. The peasants we followed through their dark winter nights have returned to their spring labours, their faces turned toward the sun, their bodies finally, blessedly warm. Their struggles seem distant now, from another time, another world. Let their story settle into your memory, like snow settling on a thatched roof. Soft, quiet, complete. Your breathing deepens, your muscles relax. The fire in their hearth burns low, just embers now, glowing softly in the darkness. And you, warm and safe in your modern comfort, can let go of their world and sink into peaceful sleep. The winter is over, spring has come, all is well. Rest now, rest, and dream of warmer days.